The Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Mobile Oyster Center is literally right out the back door of the Environmental Studies program, so I walked on down today and decided to talk to Jackie Shannon, who is the manager of this awesome program where they raise baby oysters and get them to a large enough size to use them for bay restoration projects. They grow the oysters in these tanks, and the oysters actually connect to old oyster shells that they get from restaurants. That's a great substrate for the oysters to grow on. And so once they get to a large enough size, they can then move them to other locations. And these oysters are going to be put into the Lynnhaven River for restoration. Some of the oyster shells with baby oysters on them will get put into these cages and then placed onto foster families' property where they will stay for a little while before they eventually end up in the Lynnhaven River in a permanent home, while others get seeded directly onto the floor of the river. This is exciting work, and the oysters are making a real difference in cleaning up the water quality of the Lynnhaven River. So let's hear what she has to say. This is a substantial task, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is looking beyond just the Lynnhaven River in terms of restoration. This is bay-wide, Maryland, Virginia, and beyond. So, millions and millions of oysters being grown and distributed right here by the Mobile Oyster Center.
So our overarching stretch goal is $10 billion by 2025, and that's CBF hosting a coalition, not really even being the forefront, but just knowing that we're a piece of everybody's concerted effort to get more oysters in the bay. So it's a Maryland and Virginia partnership, kind of an umbrella to capture all the work that's being done to get oysters in the water, whether it be the restoration sector, industry, which of course has the wild harvest, and aquaculture. So just recognizing that even those partners are stewards. We all can agree we want more oysters in the water. We want water quality that can support this huge stretch goal. So while a lot of restoration partners are focused on this 10 tributary strategy, which has identified 5 tributaries as priorities for restoration in Maryland and 5 priority tribs, I can't talk, in Virginia.
Yes, you can.
I'm just acting like I can. So that leaves out dozens of other tributaries that could use work that some other sub-watershed groups are already working on. For example, the Elizabeth River wasn't chosen as a selected tributary in the Tier 1 selections. However, Elizabeth River Project has done a ton of work, and you could argue that watershed has had a major recovery. So it's capturing those efforts too, talking about it, getting together quarterly, and being able to find a way to set metrics that we are reaching incrementally that goal. Knowing a lot of it is going to come from the commercial sector, and you could argue, well, they're taking oysters out of the water. But through sound management and through aquaculture, which generally replaces the crop of oysters that's marketed every year, you can start to grow those numbers through water quality improvements and more business opportunities opening up. So that's how all of us can work together to get more oysters in the water, which we know even if they're going to come out of the water to be eaten, they still provide a lot of ecological good. The oyster industry supports a vast economic landscape, not just the oystermen, but all these other jobs that support the industry, the trucks, the boats, the ice, the restaurants, tourism. So, recognizing all those other wonderful benefits outside the ecological realm that CBF promotes is really what we're trying to capture and celebrate. So one way that CBF wants to get there is by making our programs more efficient, and we did that most recently by turning our land-based operation at VIMS to the mobile setting that you just toured, our oyster barge. So we can now take our show on the road, be more efficient, be closer to the rivers that we're working on, and make higher numbers annually towards that huge 10 billion goal. So that's kind of in a nutshell, like the overarching work that we're doing with the partners through the Alliance, and then how the barge kind of fit into that campaign to be one of CBF's tools to getting there and promoting oysters.
So these are diploid oysters?
Yeah, great question.
Not the triploid?
Yep, so we want them to get out and spawn. They're all reproducing oysters. They're from a wild strain of oyster, and they're from the larvae are from the Cherry Stone hatchery. So they took a wild strain of Lynnhaven oysters, and that's what were used to make the babies that are in the tanks now. So they're not having to go through major salinity changes or any kind of, what they've been conditioned for genetically is the conditions that they're going back into.
I had a really exciting day with Jackie and this oyster restoration team. I want you to be thinking about how you might want to partner up with this group so that we can make and enact great change on the bay as well. How does this relate to sustainability and the triple bottom line? What questions do you have for Jackie and this oyster restoration team? How are we going to move forward to help clean and make the bay a better place for everyone? Big picture, let's get thinking.